Hey everybody, my name is Trevor Spires. Due to the current stay-at-home orders, I've had a lot of time lately to play around in my lab while working from home. So I've been learning a lot of cool stuff about NSX while in the lab. So I thought I would use the opportunity to record some of the stuff I'm learning and show you what I'm doing in my lab to see if maybe you could apply it to an existing environment in production where you're running NSX, or if you don't have NSX today, at the very least, you can see some of the cool stuff that we're able to do with tools native to the platform. So today, the first episode of NSX Quarantine Labs, the topic of discussion is going to be automating zero trust security in the data center, leveraging tools native to the NSX platform. And so let me explain and kind of talk through what we're going to cover over about the next 10 minutes or so. So in my lab, I have a three-tier application, right? You can see on my screen, it's pretty straightforward, where I am running a web server, an application server, and a database server. And really the only ports and protocols that these servers should be communicating on are the ones I have highlighted here, right? Issue is, in my lab right now, I have my firewall configured in a default allow posture, right? Meaning that today, public users from the internet could talk to my app server or even talk to my database server, which I don't want, right? I only want public users to be able to talk to my web front end over port 443. So what we're going to do is leverage tools native to NSX to observe the traffic happening on my web application and to take us from that current default allow posture. And the last step, the last thing we do in the lab will be switching us over to a default deny security posture, right? The coveted zero trust security posture, where no traffic is going to be allowed in my data center except for the traffic that I have permitted explicitly through the automated observation and creation of firewall rules in NSX. So I think that's a pretty good overview. Let's go ahead and take a look at the lab and walk through what this actually looks like, right? How we get from a wide open to a lockdown security posture. So in order to do this today, we're going to leverage a feature in NSX called NSX Intelligence, okay? This is a feature integrated into the NSX platform as of version 2.5. It's been around for a few months now, and we've seen a lot of enhancements in this over the last few months. So let me show you what this actually is, right? All NSX Intelligence is within your NSX interface is to spin it up. You come here to this system tab and you basically click install. You point it towards a host and it deploys an OVA automatically and then connects that to your NSX manager. The reason we have to deploy an OVA is, as you can see here, this is actually a large database. What we're doing is collecting all of the traffic that's transiting any VM in your environment and reporting that back to this database. So it's got to be pretty big, right? Which is why we need to deploy a separate OVA from the NSX Manager appliance. So that's kind of the foundation. It's just an OVA plugged into NSX, pulling stuff that NSX already can see by sitting in your hypervisor. And what that allows us to do is have that rich context and see all the traffic that may be moving around our data center. Before I show you the NSX Intelligence interface, I want to show you my current firewall configuration, just to point out that I am in that default allow security posture that we talked about earlier, right? I mentioned that we're going to go from default allow to default deny. You can see my default firewall rule is set to allow any traffic to any destination globally in my distributed firewall, okay? So with that said, let's take a look at the NSX Intelligence feature. Let's see what we're able to gather from the tool and the traffic flows, and then start generating firewall rules. So as I click on NSX Intelligence, the first thing you'll see is this is a high-level overview of basically all the traffic in my lab, right? This is showing me all the security groups that I have today, and explaining how they talk to one another. I'm looking for the last 24 hours. I'm actually going to limit the scope to the last hour just to speed things up for this lab. And what I'm going to do is, so you can search and filter on this any way you'd like. You can dig deeper, but to speed this up, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just filter immediately on those three virtual machines, my web application and database virtual machines, so we can see the traffic there and start recommending firewall rules, okay? So what I'm going to do is select my web VM, my application VM, and my database VM. Click apply, and what we're going to see is an overview of all the traffic and what's happening to that traffic within this web application, right? So I can see I've got some traffic that's allowed, right? In my lab, this is DNS traffic because I've got my DNS server sitting out here in this public IP space, which, by the way, you define what's public and what's private in the tool. By default, it assumes private public IPs, but you can put that stuff in yourself. So I have some traffic allowed. I also have some traffic being blocked, right? That's good. I have some block firewall rules, but my final rule, as you saw, is that default allow, right? So the traffic that we see here, these flows are actually flows that are unprotected, flows that are hitting that allow any rule, opening me up to security vulnerabilities in my data center, right? I can always dig deeper and look at these flows, but for right now, what I'm going to do is, now that I can see, okay, my public users are hitting my web server, my web hitting application database, I'm going to want to generate a rule set, generate firewall rules to enforce the security here, so it's no longer unprotected. I want this to be traffic that's protected by the NSX firewall. So all you have to do is start a recommendation on the screen you're already looking at, right? So I'm going to start the rule recommendation. I'll rename this web app. Web app lab test. And we see the three VMs, my web application database VMs that have already been selected from that previous screen. And again, I'm just going to limit this on the last hour to speed things up. So I'm going to start the discovery. And what's happening behind the scenes is NSX Intelligence is looking into that database of flows that it has, to everything that it's seen over the last hour, to start intelligently recommending firewall rules, okay? So that's going to take a couple of minutes because it's got to crunch through the database. So we're gonna look at that. While that's crunching the numbers, let's just see what are these flows, right? I can see here at a high level, I've got some UDP 123, that's NTP traffic. I've got some SSH traffic, some other ports and protocols here. I can actually dig deeper by looking at each VM or even the flows themselves to find out exactly what the traffic is that I'm seeing here and where it's being either permitted or denied, right? So here I can see, a lot of this traffic from my public IP space to the web space is completely unprotected, right? And I can see that as well down here, some other traffic. This looks like, this is my 8443 traffic here, okay? And this is from my web to the app server, right? So this is kind of what I expect to see. This is how my firewall is configured today. I can get additional details to say, okay, what rule is block traffic hitting, what rule is allowed traffic hitting. So it makes troubleshooting pretty easy, right? So we're highlighting the rule generation piece of this today. You can also use this as a troubleshooting tool to find out if traffic is being blocked throughout your environment. So I actually do have some active flows right now. I'm SSH'd into my web VM, and we can see that active flow happening in real time, right? This is seeing that SSH session, that putty window that I just pulled up is what we're looking at here as I'm logged into this web VM, okay? So that should be enough time. I'm actually gonna go over to our recommendation screen now to see what NSX Intelligence found and to look at the rules that it's recommending in this environment. And you'll have to excuse the alerts there. This is my lab, so it doesn't have a lot of resources, but it's got enough to show this feature. So, okay, cool. We see this web app lab recommendation that I just ran. You can see we've recommended 4 firewall rules on the 3 VM. So let's dig deeper. Let's take a look. Let's see what the recommendation is from NSX. Okay, excellent. This looks, you can see immediately we have a GUI of the flows, right? I can see that any traffic hitting my web server, my web going to app, my app going to database. This is kind of what we expected to see, right? This is actually, you know, this is NSX's representation of the drawing you see right here, right? Of my traffic flowing from my users to web, web to app, and app to database. So real quick, I'm going to review these rules, and by default, NSX gives these some automatic names: Rule 1, Rule 2. I'm going to come through, make sure I agree with the rules that it's recommending, and rename the rules to something that's more human readable. You don't have to do that. You could leave them as they are. Some customers will do that if they don't really need the friendly names in their environment. Like, let's say you're a customer leveraging automation, you don't really care what the name of the rule is. You can just click published and you're done right now. But I'm going to clean this up a little bit before I apply it to my environment. So immediately I can see I've got 4 rule recommendations. One of those rule recommendations I see is actually a SSH rule. It's recommending I allow SSH because it sees this open SSH session that I have to my web VM. Okay. In reality, I don't want to allow SSH. I'm a bad admin. I know that port's open right now, so I'm logged into the server via SSH. I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, we don't want that SSH rule, and I'm going to delete that from my recommendations, right? So, you know, this is going to recommend policies based on the traffic that it sees, and it's up to us as admins to review this and say, hey, that really shouldn't be allowed. You know, even though I am using SSH, I don't want to, right? So I'm removing the SSH. I'm also going to, you can rearrange these rules in a way that you would like, or that's more efficient for your environment. So I'm actually going to move this rule, the rule that says any to group 2, which is my web servers, because I always like to have my any rules at the top of my rule set. It makes it easier for me to read. And also, from an efficiency perspective, you want your firewall to process the most hit rules first, and then the least hit rules after that, right? It's just a way to optimize the traffic flows in your firewall. Okay, so I've got my rules. I could proceed, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and look at my group. So within the graphical piece up here, I can actually view who is in this group that the recommendation came from. I see immediately this is my web server. Great. So I'm going to actually rename this group to web security group. And I'll do the same with my others too. I'll name this one app security group. And finally, my database security group. And what you can see is by renaming these, if I look back down at my rule set, it makes the rule set much cleaner, right? This is much easier to read now, right? So NSX found the flows, grouped these automatically for me, and I'm able to rename them in a way that is more human readable, right? I can see this rule is any to my web security group. So, hey, I'll go ahead and say this, you know, any to web. I'll name this rule web to app. And finally, app to database, right? And that's it. These are the rules I need. That's all I need, and I can publish these to my firewall. And that's what I'm going to do, right? All I have to do is, after I review my recommendations, ensure that I agree with what NSX is telling me that should be allowed on the application. I'm going to proceed. You'll see it's saving those changes, and it allows me to move the policy wherever I want to. So I'm actually going to move the policy down below one of my sections where I was testing layer 7 firewall rules. Say, oh yeah, by the way, if you didn't know, NSX is not just layer 4 firewall rules. We can enforce layer 7 firewall rules. We can do intrusion detection systems, right? It's not limited to layer 4 ports and protocols, even though that's what we're talking about today. So I can see my policies here, and this looks good to me. I agree with everything. And I can also still see, hey, I've got this in a default allow policy. That's okay for right now. What I'm going to do is publish this firewall rule, okay? And what this is going to do is put those firewall rules that we just generated automatically, right? I didn't have to look at this traffic. NSX saw the traffic for me. And this is going to put them into my distributed firewall, right? So I'm going to click here and we're going to see the rules now exist inside of my distributed firewall. It's pushing that down to my host right now. And very soon we'll see that those have been applied. Cool. So as you can see, the application of the rules is a success, okay? Here's the issue. My firewall is still in that default allow state, right? My last rule still says I want to allow any source to any destination on any service, and we've set that to allow. So now that I have all the rules that I need to secure my web application, I feel safe as an admin, right, to go ahead and switch that to that default deny or zero trust security posture, right? Now in a real environment, this would be iterative. You would do this with each application in your data center. So it may not happen over 10 minutes, but you can still leverage this automated fashion to, so it's automation data discovery to apply security policies throughout your environment really quickly and effectively. So if you have, I did this with one application, but let's say you have 30 applications. Okay, great. We can do this 30 times for all these different applications, right? Maybe we could even do multiple applications simultaneously to reduce that time. But the point is it discovers and automates security policies that didn't exist before, right? Unprotected traffic. So the moment of truth, I'm gonna go ahead and switch my default policy to reject, and I'm gonna publish that to my distributed firewall, right? I'm gonna push that out to say, hey, except for my web application traffic that I want, I'm gonna go ahead and deny everything, okay? And this looks like it's already successful. It pushed out pretty quick. Oh, actually still in progress here. So let's wait a moment. Oh, okay, we're successful now. So let's take a look. Let's see what that did, right? So, first of all, I can pop in and just look at my web application, right, to see if I can still hit it. So let's do that. webapp01.corp.local. And I'm going to go to this URL. This is the full path of my web application. So excellent. And we're going to proceed here. And you can see, even though I've switched my firewall rule to default deny, I actually have been, can still access the server because NSX intelligently recommended security policies for me, right? And if you want to see, a little more, what I can show you is, right now, even though I'm able to hit my web application, right, it's fully functional. I can come in, I can search my database for different characters throughout the fields that exist. I can't hit my web application anywhere else, right? I should only be able to hit this thing via the ports that I have explicitly permitted. So that's 443, 8443, and port 80. So to prove that, what I'm going to do actually is go ahead and test by pinging that web server. So I'm going to ping web-01a.corp.local. And fingers crossed, what we should see now that we have this thing set to a default deny is that these pings are unsuccessful. I'm unable to ping my web server because I've switched this to a default deny security posture. Okay, cool. It worked. As we can see, that default deny security posture is in place. I can now no longer hit any VMs, right? And by the way, this isn't limited to my web VM. I can do this to my app VM too. So let me try to ping that app VM. Same deal, right? Different IP here. You can see I'm still not able to hit that application VM because I have everything else except for this public to 443 traffic and the requirements for my application being blocked by the NSX firewall. So what did we do? What did we look at there over the last few minutes? Oh my, ooh, wow. Oh, you know what I've done here? Let me pull up my whiteboard again for you. Haha. That was fun, right? A little tripping through time there. So what we've done is use NSX tools, use that tool of NSX Intelligence, which is baked into the NSX platform to automatically All right, I'm spelling intelligence right, to automatically get us from this default allow security posture to that coveted default deny, that deny any at the end of my firewall rule set, right? So I think this feature's, it's been fun for me to play with. I think it's going to be pretty useful to existing customers, right, who need to plan out microsegmentation, but even for new customers, right? If you're looking at NSX and a common thing we hear is like, okay, this is great, we can do this distributed firewalling, but how do we actually build the rule sets? How do we actually operationalize this? This is the ticket, right? We now have a very, very clear path to go from default allow to default deny in our data center firewall. So that's it for the first rendition of NSX Quarantine Labs. Thank you for hanging around for a few minutes, and hopefully you got something out of it. You're welcome to reach out to me anytime if you have any questions about this or anything else related to NSX. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.